Oh, okay.
He's being super shy right now, so I'm going to actually introduce him a little more, which will force him to talk more. So Tim actually, Tim has a long relationship with Krab Jab Studio. He's a sculptor. He's been working for a million years, literally. I'm not kidding. But of course, his connection with John and that period of time was the work actually that he did with both Ringo Starr. He actually created the album cover for Ringo's album.
I did?
You did.
Wow.
I'm sorry. He doesn't remember. I have to tell you.
It was a long time ago.
No, yeah. It was a million years ago.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And he also worked with both Ringo and Harry Nilsson on
Ringo's Night Out.
Ringo's Night Out, which was a animation that was live action that was never released.
I'll just feed it to you.
Right. Okay. Yes. I'm his puppet. But he actually brought this show to me about September of last year. He called me up and told me that he had this fantastic group of art that was devoted to John Lennon that was created, and wanted to know if I had any chance to show the work. And I was I thought it was a cool idea. I was a little bit skeptical at the time. He was really excited though. He said to think about it. And then there were some weird coincidences that popped up in regards to the show. One of which was that I told him that I was already booked out through the year. And then when I looked at my schedule, for some bizarre reason, I had missed the month of May, which doesn't happen. I don't miss months. I completely had missed month of May. And I was like, oh, well, I happen to have May open. And he's like, great. And I was like, well, let me think a minute, you know. And then the second coincidence was, of course, it opens May 9th, which, you know, 9, the number 9 thing. And then as I was leaving the gallery that day, when I was walking to my car, I was doing that thing where you say, well, okay, if this certain thing happens, I'll do it, you know. So I said, okay, if I turn on the radio and there's a Beatles song, I'll do it. So I turned on the radio and Imagine was on. So I was like, all right, I got to do it. So I told him, yes, I would go ahead and do this. And because we had so much time between September and now, that gave many of the artists an opportunity to do a second piece based on their favorite John Lennon song. So that's why there's several pieces here. That we have one smaller piece, which was the original piece from September, and then a larger piece that's named after a song. Including Tim's pieces. He did the Imagine piece, which was the smaller one. It's the lamp over there in the corner. And of course, when you look into the eyes of John, you get to see a fun surprise looking back at you. And then he did this second epic piece over here on the memorabilia wall, I Am the Walrus, which, as I tell him, his work is so good that it doesn't look like a real person did it.
And a real person didn't.
Right, he's not real. You guys have seen Blade Runner, right? Anyway, so that's his other piece as well. So this gave these artists a chance to work, as well as bringing on 2 new artists, Dan Chudzinski, and then Colin and Christine Poole, who worked together, who did this beautiful black figure in the kind of over here. And yeah, he kind of helped shape this show. I think he's really kind of the heart of this show. And of course, he introduced me to May, which has been wonderful. I got to meet her. We got to talk. Originally, when we were talking, it was supposed to be a quick 5-minute conversation, and then an hour later, basically she said, "Okay, I'm going to send you 9 images," and I was like, "Wow!" And I've developed a relationship since then with her, who's been really awesome. She's an amazing woman, and I really want you to get a chance to ask Tim some questions about the work that he does, not only the work that he did with Ringo and Harry. He did get a chance to meet John once. He can tell you all about it. Yes, yeah, and then have some questions to ask him about his two pieces here and what inspired him and why he picked the song that he did. So I'm going to pass this along to him. See, I talked for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Yay! Hi. No, I'm not getting up. Can everybody see me down here? Okay, we're good. Any questions? Any questions?
Well,
Yes, sir.
I'll get the obligatory one out of the way. Tell us about when you met John.
I was working on a film with Harry Nilsson and Ringo Starr. It was a pilot film called Harry and Ringo's Night Out. And it was it's supposed to be a live-action animation pilot. And they were at the Malibu house. And so I would go up there and make progress reports, thinking that their morning was my morning. Their morning was somebody else's morning. It was like noon or so. And I got there early-ish. And nobody was there, so I went into the kitchen, and there was a couple of housekeepers. And sat at a table, and she put down a box of cereal, and a bowl, and some milk, and I'm sitting there getting ready to eat. And John Lennon walks in. And I'm shitting myself. And he sits down, and he looks at the box of cereal, and he goes, "Oh, sitting on a cornflake." And it was Kellogg's cornflakes. And it was just the most perfect moment. Because I'm the Walrus was one of those songs that was so visual to me that every time I heard it, I saw this thing. And then this guy comes in who wrote it and says, "Oh, we both know this." Yeah, okay, we're good. There was a conversation. We were there at the Malibu house, and we were sitting across from each other and just randomly jabbering about shit. And he starts going into this, women are like people. They drive and think and feel and are depressed and blah blah blah, and you should really think about that. And I'm thinking, oh shut up, it was an hour for me to drive home, and as I'm driving home, thinking, this was this thing. I see you as this man with a very narrow conscience, and I'm going to give you this thing because of my experience. And it literally changed the way my relationships with women progressed from that point out. Because everybody around me thought the same thing. There's a reason for women, but it's not to be friends with them. And it was that insight that affected my relationship with women from that point out. And the fact that he thought to give it to me. So either I must have looked needy as hell and had an axe and a big frontal forehead and dragging my dame by the hair, or it was he was extraordinarily sensitive, or could be, certainly. And one of the things that always impressed me about him was that he was aware of who he was with you and the presence that he took with you. And you were just some dumbass. But he was aware of his presence in your life. And he would joke and be self-deprecating to make that experience not such a trauma. And that was extraordinarily gracious for a man who didn't have to do that. So yeah, that was my experience. And a funny guy. And a pretty good songwriter. Pick songs. And the astonishing thing about it was that there was no collaboration. Everybody picked what they wanted to pick. There was no size, there was no material, there was no interpretation. It was, I like this song, I'm going to do that. And I've always liked I'm a Walrus. And so I did a design and thought, well, that's pretty cool. And then I started doing it, and I thought, well, this is really stupid. Because it got more and more complicated, more and more difficult, and I had drawn it as a flat image and hadn't considered how it played in space, and how those chairs stacked up, and what happened between them, and how this spatial relationship worked. And then technically, because that's all resin, how that could work. And that was 2 months. And that was one of those processes where you think you know something, and then the more you think about it, the more you don't know, and you keep trying to solve problems, and none of the solutions work. And then you're thinking, well, I'm going to just do John in the bathtub, and that'll be it. And the little light goes on every now and again, and that was that piece. It was light bulb moments all the way through. And it was the most ambitious piece I've ever done. So yeah, it kind of shows you what you can do, and then shows you how you should, as soon as you realize that, you should go mow the lawn or something.
What brought you into collaboration with Ringo Starr?
I'd done his album cover.
Right, and how did that come about?
It was a miracle. And I'm not shitting you. I was unemployed and broke. And has anybody heard this? Because I can make it short. Okay, but you have.
Screw up.
That's my wife and dog. And there's the door. I was broke and I had no job, and I thought, you know, what I'd like to make album covers. I'd never had an illustration published. So I opened the phone book and there were 2 listings for album graphics. And I called the first company and nobody answered. And the second company that answered was this really sultry voice that said, Camouflage Productions. I said, well, I want to do album covers, and so can I show you my work? Okay. And I had no portfolio, so I took shit off the walls and put it in the car, and I put my last 28 cents in the gas tank. I mean, as gas, as opposed to just throwing it, because that would be stupid. And drove up to Hollywood Hills, and got into a meeting, and Barry Feinstein, who was a brilliant photographer who did the Carly Simon photograph, she's on her knees with her, what is that, corset thing? So a great photographer, who at the time was married to Carol Wayne, who, okay, he knows. So I had a meeting with him and I showed him my stuff, and he said, hold on a minute. And then a short while later, Richard Perry comes in. And we know who Richard Perry is, the producer, with the giant teeth. And they had a meeting, and then Barry comes in and he says, do you have a passport? I said, no. He said, well, you're going to need one, you're going to England. And I drove home, and I had the job. And a week later, I was on a plane to England, where I was working on the Ringo cover. And I worked, Ringo had a company called Robin or Ringo, which was like a interior design kind of thing. And I would work in the offices at night, and then hang out with some of them during the day, and that went on. And that's how I got the job. And I was in LA and finishing up the album. And I got to meet him there, and meet Richard Perry, and Ringo and Harry Nilsson were friends. And they had done a movie called Son of Dracula, which nobody has seen. And if you do, you can't watch it all the way through. But they wanted to do another movie because they had such a great time. So I wrote a treatment, let them read it, they liked some of it. And then they said, and so we're going to need a pilot. How would you like to make the pilot? You bet I would. I did one this morning. But it was going to be live action animation, and I'd never done any of it. But they let me do it. So as I'm working with Ringo and Harry on this pilot, that's when I met John and the band, and the rest is, as they say, stuff that happened. The premise was really original, that they go to a place called Rockland. It's a I was going to say fictitious, but you know, given. They go to a place and they have sidekicks. Harry's was a crow, which Ringo did the voice for, and then Ringo's was the cherub on the cover that Harry did the voice for. And in Rockland, they're supposed to say music. We all want to take a moment to think about it. And so in the pilot, there was Bowie, and there was a bunch, and they did all the voices. You know, Harry did Elvis, or the thing, and we did the pilot. And the cool thing was that we had some of the animators from Hanna-Barbera do the animation. We did the live action at the Paramount lot. So we combined all that stuff, and Harry did the editing on a moviola. He supplied the music. And we shopped it at Well, they shopped it at various studios, and nobody wanted anything to do with it. And it just died. I have no clue where the full print is. I've got a lot of outtake reels, I've got some of the backgrounds, I've got all the stills, but it's anybody's guess who's got it. But for a long time, when you looked it up, it was a documentary based on Harry and Ringo's, weekend rampages, which was probably not true. Not that they didn't rampage.
Since we'll never see the movie, did
Yeah.
they say music?
So,
What do you think? Yeah, exactly.
nobody will ever know.